Today's meeting of the Environmental Advisory Board is called to order on May 17th. The members of the Environmental Advisory Board were appointed by the City Council, and we serve voluntarily. The board's objective is to provide citizen insight to the City Council and staff on environmental activities within and affecting the City of Clearwater. Agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance to the chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phone and electronic devices. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask each individual wishing to speak to clearly state your name and spell it for the clerk. Will the members of the board and staff please introduce yourselves? We'll start to the left.
Hi, my name is Sheila Sullivan.
Marita Lynch.
Jared Leone.
John Thomas.
Micah Maxwell, Chief Innovation Officer.
Thank you very much. All right, our first order of business is to approve the minutes of our last meeting. Do I have a motion to approve as presented?
I have them.
They should have been on our agenda. Linked to the
They're
agenda.
not on this agenda.
They aren't?
No. This
Oh, did
is-
Nicole not submit them then?
It's not on a special meeting. It's not.
Oh, we had minutes from our last meeting.
Yeah, I think
though.
she does have them, but
We didn't submit them.
We don't have them for approval today.
All right, we'll move on then. All right. Citizens to be heard on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak to items that are not on the agenda? Please come forward and state your name. You'll have 3 minutes to speak on a subject that is not on today's agenda.
Hello, Brian Beckman. I don't know if it was going to be on any of the other agenda items, but I wanted to talk about the sustainability elements that are part of park. You know, in the last meeting you had, I highlighted that you could see the solar panels out there now. So again, if you haven't seen those, go up to the second or third floor and you can see them there behind the main covering of the amphitheater, as well as over to the right. But I ran out here just a few minutes ago to see if I could see the EV chargers somewhere out there, and I hadn't seen them yet, so maybe they're there and I just couldn't see them. But the reason I mentioned those, it would be great to really highlight and celebrate those two items here as key features of the park. Again, my understanding, these will be the first city buildings that'll have solar on them, which is a significant thing. We do have EV chargers in other areas of the city, but I think this is the first set of chargers that are going to be part of any of our city parks. All great things to highlight for the community, as well as towards goals of green print, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you very much, Brian. Anyone else to speak to items that are not on the agenda? Please come forward. State your name.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Bill Johnson, and I kind of fell in a catch-22 yesterday, so let me ask you, at this point in time, will you be taking comments when you talk about the comprehensive plan
Yes, we
later
will.
in the meeting?
Yes, we will.
Because they didn't do that yesterday, so thank you.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I'll
we'll
wait for
certainly
it.
do that. Yes, certainly. All right. Anyone else? All right. Then we'll move on to the next item. 3.1 EAB staff alignment.
Yeah, so this is a follow-up. This is our third meeting. We started talking about this back at, it was in March. And we've had a meeting every month since. But made some adjustments based on some of the comments at the last meeting. I think it...
Do we, do you need to put it up, or will they do it back at the...
I think they're supposed to.
There they go, yeah.
Great, thank you.
It's a little tough to see, I know. But this is, this is the document that we've been talking about for the last several meetings to try to get some good alignment between the board and the staff to make sure that we're meeting your needs and that we're all on the right track. Made a couple adjustments. They're up there in sort of the peach color as far as some of the changes to our standard operating objectives included the strategic plans for the different departments, making sure that we're bringing those forward as they're being approved so that you'll have a chance to see what kind of environmental elements are included in those various plans. And those could be from Marine and Aviation or Parks and Recreation or any department. Also included our 5-year capital budget. That's something that we plan to talk about in July. So just to sort of codify that and place it in here as well to make sure that you all know that that's an expectation that we're going to bring to you. And also the comprehensive plan, which we're going to have some conversation about a little later today. The other one there was to make sure that we're bringing you the updates on the implementation related to green print, to Ready for 100, synergistic as well, which is sort of an offshoot of green print, but we intend to bring our first annual numbers for synergistic in July. We're going to be talking to the council about it in June. They're tallying the numbers now. We don't have them quite yet, but we started our implementation there last March, and it runs about a month and a half to 2 months back on the utility bills, so it takes a little while to get everything in and the like. So those are the changes we made there, and then of course the packet also we made a couple language changes to the top part there, that objective there, and I don't have a copy to place up on the screen, but you should have it in your packets as well. In essence, the change to the language I made based on some of the conversation last month was to engage in multi-directional conversations with the city commission, which should be council, I need to change that, and staff about potential environmental impacts of national, regional, and local decisions that have the potential to impact the community. I don't know if that's perfect, but that's what I wanted to bring forward to y'all to take a look at and see if you had any comments about it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think we had a really robust discussion about this at our last meeting. I think that's great you were able to synthesize it and put it together. I know we were missing some of our members who are here this time, so yeah, if there are some discussion on the changes to the rubric or anything else, I'll open it up to the board to discuss.
Thank you, this is great, thank you for that. And I know I pushed about having a two-way conversation. I just think citizens should be included in this.
I couldn't hear that.
I just think citizens, the term citizens, like in the original one on that rubric that you're showing, that talks about citizens. So when it says to engage in multi-directional conversations with city commission and staff, I think we need to add in there, and citizens.
Okay.
That's all. Otherwise, thank you very much.
I'd note that it should say city council, not commission.
Yep. And we'll bring it forward next month or not next month, July. Hopefully we'll have our final version. So if y'all have any other further comments or anything, you're certainly welcome to send those off dais as well, if you come up with them later.
All right. Sheila, do you have any?
Yeah, I like it. I like the multi-directional conversation piece.
Great.
John?
I confess, I wasn't even aware that we had a meeting today until mid-afternoon. I had missed the March meeting, but never checked on the website, never saw any other postings several weeks ago about another meeting. I presumed our next meeting was mid-July. I'm flying back to be here for the July meeting. Now I just heard I missed an April meeting that I didn't get notice of. So I can't comment, and I haven't had the time to review any of the materials, but did my best to get here.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. All right, I'll open this up to the general for general comment. Are there any comments from the audience? Please step forward. All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item, 3.2, review amendments to the Clearwater Code of Ordinance amending Chapter 2, Articles 1 and 2 relating to adding a definition of electronic cigarette, prohibition of smoking and vaping on city-owned public parks.
Good
Come on
afternoon,
down.
Board. I'm Deputy Chief Mike Walker with the Clearwater Police Department. Today I'll be providing a summary of the upcoming smoking ordinance, which will be heard in the first part of June in 2 separate readings. We love our community. We want to make sure we're doing what's best for the environment and what's best for our health and what's best for the kids. Recently, Florida State Statute 386.209 enacted and signed into law by the Governor on June 24th, 2022. Effective July 1st, 2022, amended the Florida Clean Air Act, Chapter 386, Part 2, Florida statutes, to provide that counties and municipalities may restrict smoking within the boundaries of any public places or public parks. the local government owns, with the exception of restrictions of the smoking of unfiltered cigars. Cigarette butts are one of the most commonly found items of litter on Florida beaches. The litter caused by those who improperly dispose of cigarette butts or other tobacco products on the public beach or in the public parks is difficult to remove from the beaches. It can cause hazards to the wildlife and can significantly detract from healthy environments and reduce the enjoyment of the public at the beaches or parks. The Florida legislature, in its staff analysis to the amendment to Chapter 386, Part 2, noted that the exposure to secondhand smoke can cause numerous health problems and has been linked to cancer and to other potentially fatal diseases. Secondhand smoke is generally defined as smoke from burning tobacco products or smoke that is exhaled by a tobacco smoker. The ordinance authorizes the Clearwater Police Department to issue a Class 4 civic citation Class 4 civic infraction to people smoking tobacco products, except for unfiltered cigars, within city parks and beaches. This is an educational-driven campaign by the police department. This ban is more about education than it is enforcing the citations. Nobody wants secondhand smoke in their private space or cigarette butts scattered about their beach. I do have one thing that I would like to put on the record that I was asked to was on the actual agenda item. At the very bottom, there's an error where it says the ordinance authorizes the Clearwater Police Department to issue a Class 4 civic infraction to people smoking tobacco products, except for unfiltered cigars. That should be, or electronic cigarettes should be removed from there. I was asked to clarify that. It's on the agenda item, the cover page. And that's all I have. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much for joining us. Yeah.
Chief, how are we defining public beaches,
As far as
this ordinance?
the area,
Yes.
we're using the actual sand, from my understanding, sand forward.
So even if that's privately owned beach, for example, on Sand Key, there's a very wide beach, 400 feet in some areas, and does it extend from the coastal construction control line, which is even further back, or does it just from the high tide line, or, what's the defining line?
I don't have the defining answer for you right here. There is some geographic coordinates in there that I have. I don't know where they are exactly, but the goal of this is to enforce it in the public beaches with an educational component of making sure people understand that you can't do this in public beaches parts. We wouldn't go into the private sector of the beach if it was owned privately, from my understanding of that.
I guess that, in my mind, it requires some more clarification as to where the jurisdictional lines would be. Because I live on Sand Key, and we have a lot of pedestrian traffic that comes up and down the beach from Sand Key Park and, as far from Bel Air.
It does say here that it's the public bathing beaches and the Sand Key Public Beach there specifically in the
Public means the public bathing beaches and the Sand Key Public Beach, but not, so it does not apply then to any of the lands basically south of Sand Key Park.
Correct. My understanding would be the public bathing beach areas.
And I don't.
Although the public has access along the waterfront.
And I don't think we were provided the ability by the state legislature to control those private beaches in the ordinance that they passed, or not ordinance, the law that they passed. It did not, it included the public beaches, from what I understand, not any of the private areas.
Yeah, but the public has the right of passage along from the high tide line down toward the water. So they can smoke their cigars there while people are in their beach chairs and under their umbrellas and enjoying building castles and forts.
So cigars would be authorized.
Yeah.
But like I said, our primary focus would be the educational component of this entire ordinance, enforcing that as far as letting people know in the public bathing areas. I can look into it further and get you a clarified answer as far as Sand Key goes, but like I said, this is our approach to this is more of the public bathing areas.
All right.
Hooray, this is wonderful. I'm so happy you're doing this. This is great. to me, there's nothing, it's really disgusting smoking on the beach. I can't tell you how many times I paid for a cabana early in the morning, have people come down, start smoking, and wafts all by us. And just last week, I paid for a cabana, and a guy came down and was smoking a cigar. So my question is, why are cigars exempted? Because,
That was chosen by the state legislative.
oh, jeez. Nobody should say. Anyway, and I'm confused about what you're saying about vaping. Is vaping allowed or is not allowed?
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
It's not.
Which is what
Vaping and
this does
e-cigarettes
say.
are very similar.
It does say this, so I'm confused what correction you were making.
So on the actual agenda item, there was a misprint where it says it was allowed. And when I was clarifying with the legal advisor from the city, for the police department this morning, she asked that I have that corrected on the record,
Okay.
because it was just a typo, but it is not allowed.
Okay, here's my next question. I told you I had rented a cabana on the beach, and I said to the guy taking my money, I said, what if somebody sits next to me and starts smoking? Can I move? And he said, well, everybody's allowed to smoke. I said, no, there's an ordinance coming, and it's going to change that. So in the future, what can I say to the guy collecting my money about the ordinance? Can I say, well, I can call the police and they can talk about
Yeah,
it?
we have, especially on the beach, we have two special teams that are out there that are
Oh, you do?
address the quality of life of issues.
Okay.
And they are actively patrolling the sands, so if that's something that you could grab with them, you could grab a lifeguard. We would
Okay.
respond to that and address it accordingly. Like I said, our goal with this is the educational component of it. I
Right.
don't want to sit there and start writing people from Ohio an excessive fine, but the educational component is the most important part.
And is there an educational component going to all the vendors on the beach with umbrellas and cabanas?
So the district commander we're actually working on a program to let everybody know when this does pass or goes to the city council, that these are the rules and this is what we're going to take forward. So we do educate the public and the businesses and the stakeholders on the beach as well.
Okay. Do you know when it's going to city council?
I believe it's June 5th and 7th. It's the first week.
Okay, and then
5th and 8th, maybe,
what's the time period, but then it will become effective when after
as
that?
soon as it's signed after the second reading.
And enforcement and education will happen right away? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah, I think this is great. I just had a question about what is a class 4 civil infraction? What is that?
It's an ordinance violation. It would be where, it's like a speeding ticket, I could say. It's a non-criminal, it's a civil infraction, so it's just a fine assessed to you for violation of the ordinance.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. Thanks for putting this together. I think it's unfortunate that we have to take such a step to do this, that it's such a ubiquitous problem that people throw their cigarette butts out. Walking in to the library today, there were almost a dozen right at the entrance. So it's definitely a problem and a challenge, I'm sure, for enforcement. You've mentioned that it's more an education movement than enforcement. How do you visualize that? Rather than enforcing, how do you visualize the educational component? Just talking to people who are smoking on the beach and telling them to put it out, they can't do this, or how
I
is
think
it?
a two-step approach, excuse me. If the units or the patrol officers are out there and they see that, their initial contact would be just to educate them, just so you know there is a no smoking ordinance on the beach. We ask you kindly to put it out, just educational effort. Same thing, if someone calls, we can respond the same way. There could be a point in time where we have to elevate that to the civil infraction, but our goal is to provide that education first and make the community and the visitors aware of that, so we don't have to go to that level, because this is something different.
If we're looking for suggestions for education, I noticed in a story for a similar ban in Miami, they had actually put public art on the beach of cigarette butts, giant cigarette butts in the sand, and that kind of raised awareness about the campaign to not smoke out there. I think signage might be helpful, although as many times as you might go out to the beach, there are people in the dunes, even though that has been illegal for a long time to be in the dunes. So like I said, I applaud the efforts. I think it'll definitely be a challenge that I guess you guys are looking
We're up for the challenge, and like I said, I don't want to keep repeating it, but that educational component, I think, will be key to people that come out there, because people that don't pay attention to changes like this, we can enact that and explain to them, hey, you can't do this. Or if someone calls and says, hey, the person's smoking next to us, we can come and respond out there and teach them.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, this ordinance, I compared it to the ordinance in St. Pete that passed late last year in October, and I thought I like that ours references the environmental impact and issue. That is the reason for bringing this forward, that it's not just because we're allowed to do it, but it's because there really isn't another mechanism to try to work on this problem, at least at our level. I think at a federal level, maybe the government could tell cigarette makers to use compostable items rather than things that aren't environmentally friendly, but that's out of our hands, so I think what we can do is something like this. Unfortunately, even though, I do wonder though with having littering ordinances out there already, how does this vary from that? Or would this, if someone is really, say they just dump out an ashtray in front of an officer who's trying to educate them, would there be an ability to add on or something like that, or just?
There are different circumstances where they could elevate that to a different classification. Like I said, 99% of the time we do get compliance with that, because you're talking to usually people that are understandable and explaining to it. The younger generation also has been using e-cigarettes and vaping, but that's also, and the way you deliver it to them is the way that you get responses sometimes too, and just explain to them that, listen, I understand, but you can't do it here, you can't do it there. Just because you're old enough you just can't do it. But in that type of situation, the officer would evaluate the circumstances and make the appropriate decision based on that. But there are different avenues for that type of scenario.
Yeah, so I think this is just another tool in the tool belt, so to speak.
It is. Like I said, just to reiterate the fact, the education component is very important. And like I said, the district commander for the beach is going to get that information out there in the parks as well. And there are signs out there posted, no smoking in the park. So.
Oh, there will be signage?
There will be.
Okay, good.
I think that's great. All right, I have no other comment. We'll open it up if there's any general comment from the audience. All right. Do you need anything from us, a motion or anything like that, or just anything? Okay, great.
No.
Thank you for informing us
Thank
about
you.
this.
I appreciate the articles that were passed along too. They're very, very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Take care, be safe.
Does
All
it
right.
make sense for us to provide a note of support for this? to
Yeah, I
the
think we
council?
can send a letter of, I think we should send a letter of support for the ordinance, though.
Sure.
We can draft
I'll
one.
move we send a letter to the city council recommending support for this ordinance change.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposed? All right, motion carries. So, I can pen a short letter and send it to Micah, who can send it to everyone else, and we can
Yep,
put it
we'll-
together.
We'll include it in the agenda item as well, so.
Perfect. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Our next item is 3.3, a presentation of Conservation and Coastal Management, chapter of Clearwater 2045, the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Kyle Brotherton, Senior Planner with the Planning and Development Department. And we're here today to really go over some of the sustainability, resiliency, and environmental-related goals, objectives, and policies of our comprehensive plan. I know that your agenda says the Conservation Coastal Management chapter, and that is really the chapter that focuses the most on those items, but we do have some scattered about, so we thought it would be important to come and bring those before you here again today. So just a quick agenda of this presentation. We'll give some background on the comprehensive plan, what it is, why it's important. We're also going to go over the changes in format that we're proposing from our current plan to our proposed plan, as well as the public engagement that led to where we're at now. We were actually before you in October of 2022 to give you a brief update and to get this on your radar, so we're definitely bringing it back. Before we get into the meat, we'll go over the chapters that we're proposing, just a quick overview to give you an idea of what they cover in general. And then, as I said before, we're going to be going over sustainability-related goals and objectives, resiliency-related goals and objectives, and lastly, environmentally-related goals and objectives. And then we'll finish up with some next steps. And then as I go through, I'll give you some time to answer questions if you have any as we go through the presentation. So what is a comprehensive plan? Back in 1986, the state enacted the first laws for comprehensive plans in the state of Florida, and those were really meant to deal with growth management. And in 1989, the city adopted their first comprehensive plan. Since that time, the state laws have changed greatly for comprehensive plans. They used to be very prescriptive, and now they offer more flexibility for local municipalities to really make that comprehensive plan geared for that local municipality. So major updates to the comprehensive plan occur every 7 to 10 years. That could be through change in council direction, other policy direction, or even changes in state laws. The comprehensive plan is a guiding document for the city. It provides policy, guidance, and long-term vision. For this project, we're going out to 2045. Our current comprehensive plan was adopted in 2008, and since that time, we have had minor amendments. So as I mentioned, due to state change laws that have been changed, we're going to be changing the format of our plan. Currently, there are 11 plan elements, and as we go forward, we've proposed to have 5 new core chapters. Our current plan is very text-heavy. It's Times New Roman 12-point font. It's an interesting read, very thrilling. As we go forward, we're going to include a lot more graphics and photos to really help tell the story. Old state laws required very prescriptive policies to be in each element, so there's a lot of repetitiveness across those elements. So as we go forward, we're really going to work to remove that repetitiveness. There will be some cross-cutting ideas amongst chapters, but really trying to get rid of that repetitiveness, and in turn make it a document that's easy to be read by City Council, Environmental Board, Community Development Board, as well as the public. And then those policies that we currently have are very prescriptive. The city shall do this, the city must do that. And that language is typically reserved for development codes. As we go forward, we're going to change those to more action-oriented policies or objectives. Evaluate this, research that, consider this. And that's really more in line with what a comprehensive plan is meant to do. So some of our public engagement. The comprehensive plan, writing a comprehensive plan is a very complex project, requires a lot of background data, a lot of public engagement. So we started this project in late 2020, and as a public engagement you've seen on the screen, we had over 300 total participants, which we were very proud of. And through all of that engagement, we did hear a number of common themes. One of the ones was related to transportation, whether that be safety of the network, connectivity of the network, public transit reliability, that all falls under that umbrella of transportation. We also heard that we need to do better promoting our social, cultural, and artistic vibrancy throughout the city. While the comprehensive plan does guide the entire city, we did hear a lot about bringing new life to downtown. And we also heard from our residents that we need to do a better job of balancing policy emphasis throughout the entire city, as opposed to just on the beach or just in downtown. Through all that engagement, we were able to create a vision statement, and we also had an engagement opportunity at our in-person to actually create this vision statement. So staff presented our current vision statement, our current comprehensive plan, and we had smaller groups of the larger group. We asked each of these smaller groups to take some time to draft their own vision statement of what they thought the vision statement should be going forward. So after all those were drafted, we were presented each group's vision statement to the entire group, and we had our participants vote. So this vision statement is based off of all that feedback and all that engagement activity. So since this is a very new policy document that we're going to have, yes?
You said if you ask questions during?
Sure.
Can we go back a slide?
Absolutely.
So there's nothing that relates to the environment or sustainability or resiliency or anything in there. Is that is that, as far as other cities' visions, is it, especially coastal cities, are we an outlier that we don't include anything like that in our vision?
So we could definitely take a look and see what other communities have done, especially communities that are on water. But this vision statement, like I said, was really crafted by all of our participants that were in these sessions. So all of these are based on what they had written down and what they had voted on.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned, we have 5 core chapters. Just a quick overview of all of these chapters. So quality places, this is really based on our current future land use and housing elements. But this chapter is really meant to provide guidance for land use, development, redevelopment decisions, our place character preservation, neighborhood stability, housing affordability, as well as economic development. And as we go forward, our current elements are titled A, B, or C, and we're going to redo that. So this chapter will have the denotation of QP for quality places. So when we go into this presentation, if you see something QP, that relates to quality places, and we've done that with all the chapters. Second chapter is our mobility chapter, and this is really heavily geared towards transportation. But really it's going to provide guidance for increasing the performance of the roadway network, increasing our travel safety and destination accessibility, as well as promoting walking, biking, and transit use as safe and convenient alternatives to driving. And again, going forward, any goal, objective, or policy that falls under this chapter will be titled with the letter M. Parks and public places. This one's pretty straightforward. This relates to our parks, open spaces, and recreational facilities throughout the city. Currently, we're proposing just minor amendments to this chapter, largely in part because our Parks and Recreation Department is undergoing a project to update the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That project is anticipated to be finished at the end of the year. So once that project is finished, we'll come back and we'll do a complete overhaul to this chapter. And this one will have the triple P, so PPP in front of any goals, objectives, or policies for that. Conservation Coastal Management, this one is probably the most famous for this board, but this really offers guidance for our natural resources, managing development, redevelopment within our coastal areas, stormwater discharges, post-disaster redevelopment, and largely sustainability and resiliency. And this will be called CCM as we go forward. And then last but not least is our support services chapter, and this really deals with the public services that are offered by the city. Currently, this is really our public utilities, so potable water, sanitary sewer, reclaimed water, stormwater, and solid waste. But as we were going through this, we felt it important to include our natural gas, our police and fire and rescue departments, as well as the library system, because there are services offered by the city, and we definitely need to plan for those into the future. And these will be noted with SS. So first we'll move into our sustainability-related goals and objectives. And if you're not familiar with the difference between goals, objectives, and policies, goals are high-level statements that the city wants to achieve. Objectives are statements that really direct how to get to that goal, and then policies are the actual actionable items or steps taken to achieve the objectives. So the first, we have a policy QP 1.1.4, and this really deals with solar facilities. So we're going to allow these to be constructed in all of our stormwater or drainage features, which are allowed throughout the entire city. We're also going to establish appropriate development standards for those floating solar within our community development code. We don't have any yet, so that's where this policy is going. So this one's pretty specific, but if you have any questions on it, I'd definitely be more than happy to answer those. Okay. Next, we have objective M1.4. This is really related to Greenprint 2.0, specifically towards the transportation system. And we have 5 policies to achieve this objective. The first one is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions of the city fleet by shifting to more fuel-efficient vehicles. And this is also in our coastal and conservation management chapter as well. We're also looking to expand publicly accessible electrical vehicle or EV charging infrastructure, especially at our city facilities. And we're also going to look to establish requirements for EV charging infrastructure within our new development or redevelopment. And again, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. Give you a chance to review.
The
Yes.
alternative fuels mentioned, is that would natural gas be considered alternative fuel?
It could be. I do know that our solid waste vehicles are all powered by compressed natural gas, but that could also be others that we might not know of.
And then is that also in conjunction with electrifying the fleet?
Mm-hmm. Correct, yeah. And we've kept it more fuel efficient or more fuel efficient or alternative fuels as well. So that would look for electronic or compressed natural gas or whatever might come in the future. Next, we have sustainability goal, CCM4. So this is a new goal that we don't currently have. This really relates to sustainable and resilient techniques, whether it be in land use, transportation, housing, infrastructure planning, general decision-making, or development. For this one, there are 3 objectives. So generally, our first objective, 4.1, deals with sustainable and resilient uses within our development code. Objective 4.2 deals with sustainable and resilient building techniques. And then objective 4.3 is implementation of Clearwater Greenprint 2.0. So for objective 4.1, there are 5 policies. For this, we're considering to allow community gardens to be located within all of our zoning districts. Currently, they're allowed in a few, but we'd like to expand that to all. We would also look to evaluate amendments to our code to allow urban agricultural and food production uses. I know that was a big topic when we were here in October. And we'd also look to consider a commercial composting program while continuing to do that with our residential composting program. We have one already, and we want to continue to do that. Objective 4.2, this has 8 policies to guide to get to that objective. But for this, we would look to set and establish green building standards within our code, as well as encourage affordable housing projects to be constructed consistent with LEED standards or with the Florida Green Building Coalition's Green Land Development and Building Standards. We would also look to amend our development code to permit the installation and use of renewable technologies, such as solar or scaled wind turbines. And we would also look to research and incorporated biophilic planning, which is generally the use of natural objects and shapes within our development code. And the last is our objective 4.3, Clearwater Greenprint 2.0. As I mentioned earlier, for our fleet, we would look to transition to alternative fuel vehicles. We would look to implement solar installations on our municipally owned buildings, look to implement energy management and conservation program for all city facilities, as well as inventory and identify public and semi-public lands that would be suitable for food production pilot projects. And any questions on this goal, objective, or policies?
You mentioned that there's already a composting program. Is that the city composting educational where they give you the composting bin?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as I should mention, we do have staff available if there's any questions that I might not be able to specifically answer. But yeah, that one is for that one, as you mentioned.
Okay. There's not a pilot of composting, like a commercial composting yet?
No, not yet.
Will you send this to us?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can send this to you.
So what is on the website for the agenda of coastal management? We're not discussing that at all today.
We're going to go over 3 of those.
Okay.
That chapter was really geared towards the environmental board is what we thought, but we wanted to also include some more that were in other chapters that may or may not have appealed to the board, so.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was a mistake that it was uploaded instead of that.
No mistake. So yeah, we can definitely provide this to you. Next is an objective, SS 4.5. This is our support services, and this really deals with the potable water system. We want to make sure that it's compatible with the environment and seeks to conserve our natural resources. So for this, we have 3 policies. The first would be to continue to implement our water protection ordinance. The second would be to continue to provide educational awareness to inform citizens of the need and opportunities for conserving potable water. And then we'd also look to continue to develop strategies aimed at reducing potable water consumption, whether that's through water conservation rates, operational measures, rebate and plumbing retrofit programs, or landscape and irrigation efficiency programs. And then any questions on this?
Oh, I think putting programs together to help reduce the use of water would be great. The county used to have a toilet rebate program to switch out I think if the city offered that or something, other programs like that would be really helpful. As far as for potable water, I noticed in the conservation coastal management, the discussion still of the recharging of water. Is that something that's also part of this objective then? The recharge plan for recharge?
The groundwater replenishment, it's either under potable or it's under the reclaimed, but it isn't a policy within our plan right now, yeah. So it is there, it just might not be in this particular objective.
How does that relate, as far as sustainability, that the practice of that recharge, how is that seen in practice for sustainability practices?
Rich, would you be able to answer that, maybe? The water recharge? 4.6. Yeah, so objective 4.6 and policy 4.6.3 is our groundwater quality by wellhead protection. And the importance of groundwater aquifer recharge is 4.6.1. So I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I'm just curious what the science is on how that water has been. My concern has always been about the aquifer, and there isn't long-term science that shows that doesn't have impact on the aquifer over time, or is that incorrect?
So I think this, Rich Gardner, Public Utilities. I think this is with respect to the groundwater replenishment program, where we were going to take reclaimed water, treat it further, and put it back into the aquifer, where it would be pulled out elsewhere and treated again to become drinking water. So
is that practice in use anywhere?
In California,
outside of there, is it in use anywhere in Florida though?
not to my knowledge. It's not used anywhere in Florida.
Is it in the works in any municipality in the state?
Clearwater.
This city is the only one looking into that program.
I don't know for sure. I know a lot of municipalities were interested in what we developed, so I don't know if they went further to implement it or not.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions about that.
No, I don't.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. questions before we move on? Okay. So next we have resilience-related goals and objectives. So the first here is CCM2, goal CCM2. So this really focuses on our built environment and protecting built environment as well as public facilities from flooding risks and sea level rise. For this one, there are 7 objectives, and they're broken out into two slides each for posterity's sake. So the first one relates to reducing flood risk and losses. The second goal, or objective 2.2, really relates to protecting our city facilities. 2.3 is resilient protection standards, and objective 2.4 is to conserve our public access to our beaches. For objective 2.1, there are 2 policies. This one ensures that development and flood plans are consistent with all applicable plans, codes, as well as the National Flood Insurance Policy Community Rating System, so the NFIP CRS. We're going to continue to bring non-compliant structures into conformance with the FEMA standards and other applicable building codes, and both of these policies really aim to reduce the risk of floods and sea level rise. Objective 2.2 has 5 policies, but within this we're looking to identify public facilities and infrastructure that's at risk from flooding and sea level rise, and use vulnerability assessments to determine if those facilities should be built, rebuilt, modified, or relocated. We'd also look to incorporate stabilization and armoring into our roadway construction and reconstruction, and evaluate elevating roadways above base flood elevations to ensure that there's dry access to those roadways during flooding events. And we'd also consider implementing a sea level rise scenario when designing our critical city infrastructure to ensure that the lifespans of that infrastructure is maximized to the greatest extent possible.
I have a question.
Yes.
So some of this has been done already with the water treatment plants, the consolidation of the water treatment plants. So how are you identifying which city buildings? Are you going to assess all city buildings?
That would be something that we'd figure out. So this really sets the goal or the policy to do a vulnerability assessment. And as we go into it, we would determine which ones would actually need that.
Okay,
So whether it be the water reclamation facilities or other infrastructure.
okay. And when you say elevating roadways, I immediately think of the Courtney Campbell. But that's not a city, I mean, that's multi-agency.
Correct. So again, this is just more of a guidance, but we do have intergovernmental coordination, which will be in a following chapter plan implementation that we're currently working on. So if any state road or county road, we would have to work with Pinellas County, state of Florida, to actually go ahead and implement something like that. But since that is an evacuation route, I'm sure that they would be about, talking about that.
Are they doing assessments on their level also?
I'm not sure what the state or what the county's doing, yeah. And then our last 3 objectives under goal CCM2 really deal with our coastal storm area, evacuation times and routes, and then adaptation action areas. So there are 5 policies under our coastal storm area objective, but really they continue to direct permanent populations and certain uses away from the coastal storm area, as well as prioritize public expenditures that restore or enhance natural resources. So just generally speaking, our coastal storm area are those areas of the city that are within the FEMA floodplains that experience flooding events, high tide events, or sea level rise. There are 7 policies for objective 2.6, but generally speaking, they really continue to require disaster plans for certain uses and evacuation plans for hotel uses on our beach. And we look to ensure that all appropriate efforts are made to evacuate all vulnerable populations during those times. And then lastly, adaptation action areas. There are 4 policies, but really we'd be looking to identify areas that are particularly vulnerable to flooding and designate those as adaptation action areas.
So this is all talking about dealing with existing structures, so there's nothing talking about where things will be allowed to be built based on sand erosion and vulnerability to storm surge?
Correct. This deals mostly with the built environment already. We do have some in our future land use, or I should say our quality places chapter, that gets into future uses and how to cite those. I do believe we have some as well that might be touched on a little bit later in this presentation here in the conservation coastal management that also gets at those future uses.
Does any of this touch upon the beach renourishment activities that we're attempting to undergo?
No, I do believe that is a county project, and we just offer our support. Next objective is SS 3.2, so this deals with our stormwater, but really be looking to lower our high water profiles during storm events, really just to reduce our flooding occurrences and lessening the adverse impacts on public health. For this, there are 7 policies, But with this, we're looking to continue or consider natural or man-made wetlands to provide stormwater management wherever possible. Looking to provide multiple use facilities, so recreational facilities with open channel stormwater management systems, such as Glen Oaks Park. That's a good example of one of these facilities. And then lastly, we would continue to designate any wetlands as preservation on a future land use map, which would protect those into the future. Again, related to stormwater, objective SS 3.3, this is to protect and enhance the quality of our receiving waters, through use of best management practices and with watershed management plans. So there are 8 policies, and this really relates to stormwater management plans that are already adopted. But really would be continuing to prevent water pollution from erosion or siltation through the use of best management practices, so silt fencing when something's being redeveloped. We would continue to require vegetated swales, sodding, or appropriate landscaping as components of drainage systems for natural filtration. We'll continue to monitor our major stormwater outfalls and receiving bodies to identify the quality of stormwater and its impacts, as well as maximize water recharge potential in designing stormwater management improvements by utilizing natural wetland areas as storage.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Going back to the, one of the first slides that you showed us, was the placement of the floating solar fields within stormwater management facilities. It seems to be, I know the benefits of the solar is one thing, but those stormwater management facilities do more than just address flooding. There's a water quality benefit, the attenuation and uptake of nutrients by the vegetation that grows within those ponds, whether it's aquatic plants or they're more of a dry basin. And it seems like the two are in conflict, those two policies, in that the solar aspects might be affected by, affect the water quality benefits of stormwater basins.
I totally understand what you're saying. Sarah Kessler, lead environmental specialist in the Public Works Department. So I was actually talking to a company that's installed tons of them. So if you've been, I first saw it when I went over to Universal, and they have the floating solar panels, right when you turn into Universal Studios, so I was like, that's cool. And then they have them also at the Orlando airport in one of the giant ponds right at the airport, and it says whatever the Orlando airport stands for. They put it on solar panels, they lit it up, it's really cool. So you can't put it in all stormwater ponds. It's not for everyone. But there are a few that it would be appropriate, that there are a little bit deeper, that don't have that water quality with, the first 2 feet of vegetation, that are actually deeper. And with those deeper stormwater ponds, those solar panels are actually going to provide a benefit, because you'll end up having fish there, and then it gets warmer and they have the shadows, and so you end up having the habitat of those stormwater ponds as well. And so they've done a lot of research about it. This particular company that I've talked to, they've pretty much done all of the floating solar panels in the southeast U.S., so they've done tons of the projects, and like I said, it's not for every pond. You need the larger, deeper ones, but it is really effective, and it is, the Water Management District, the DEP recognize that there is a benefit to having these shaded areas, and it doesn't impact the integrity of the pond and the function of the pond either. So it still provides the water quality that's necessary for the pond.
Thank you for the clarification. That's where I was kind of headed, is that if it's a deep water pond, it's an appropriate use, but it didn't come through on that first slide that was the goal.
So we can go back and see if there's language changing.
No, I think the way Sarah clarified.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I was just going to comment. I noticed this is the second slide that shows a photo of Stevenson Creek. I'm wondering if there's a policy in place that can help us achieve some of these objectives, because I know Stevenson Creek has had a lot of environmental problems even very recently. the Marshall Street plant spill a few weeks ago, or last week, and previous spills a few years ago, and efforts in the past to dredge it were completed, and then I'm just curious if there's some policies that will include, making these objectives achievable. So.
Sarah Kessler again. This is an objective. This isn't a policy.
Yeah, this is objective.
This is the policies that are here?
A few of them, yeah.
Okay. So best management practices is a super generic term, as you guys know. But under that, it's also a very specific term from the Department of Environmental Protection. So under that best management practices is their TMDL program, which Stevenson Creek has a TMDL for nutrients. And part of that is requiring the city to have watershed management plans, which we have one, but it's kind of old. And so we're actually planning on updating that, going out for an RFQ in a couple months to update that plan. So by putting that specific term, best management practices, in there, it does commit us to continuing to follow what DEP says and their directive to continue to update those watershed management plans and continue to follow the water quality rules and to assess all of those things that haven't been included in the newest version. So the old version of the Stevenson Creek Watershed Master Plan, it was Lake Bellevue, like they went and put a weir at Lake Bellevue. It was construction of Glen Oaks. It was the dredging of Stevenson Creek. And so those were 3 huge projects, and we haven't done any update since then. So it's like the update is going to include all of those things and come up with new projects to move us forward on that. So just having these policies and like saying monitoring the stormwater outfalls and things like that, that is all part of the watershed management plan that we will be updating. So it doesn't need to like specifically prescribe it in the policy. It says enough in there to allow us the latitude to do the plan as we want to do it.
Okay, I asked because it did in the conservation and coastal management section, it specifically mentioned the Cooper's Bayou plan, and I just wanted to make sure that there was still something there for Stevenson Creek.
Since I'm standing here. Just to give you a quick update. So going out for an RFQ on the final design along with the recreation elements of Cooper's Bayou. Hopefully have a consultant in place before the end of the fiscal year. So we're going to do the RFQ and then have to negotiate and get it approved by council. And so hopefully we'll have that, and then I can come back and tell you guys a little bit more about like the projection, talk to you a little bit more about your ideas with that. But that is, we have design money for that, and we have design money for the watershed management plan in Stevenson Creek. So both sides. So.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, no, like I only mentioned, like I said, the Stevenson Creek having a plan for that because there was the mention of Cooper's Bayou plan. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much.
Right. Now we're moving into last bit of information here, our environmentally related goals and objectives. So the first objective is QP 1.5. This deals with our landscaping and tree protection standards that we currently have in the code. So we have 7 policies related to this one, but really we're going to continue to protect trees during site development or redevelopment and reduce impacts with trees in the right-of-way. We're also going to consider enhanced landscaping standards for scenic corridors and maintain and enhance existing landscape medians throughout the city. And we're also going to continue to promote the use of native plants and xeriscaping during site development or redevelopment. I know there's a tree topic on the agenda for today too, so this might fall right into that. And then I'll move into objective.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Tree protection standards. Who's being protected? The trees?
Trees, yes.
Good. Thank you.
And then QP 1.6 is also ties in with trees, but this deals more towards a tree canopy. We want to prioritize the creation of a sustainable tree canopy within the city. Currently, we have 3 policies related to this. We would like to preserve the shade tree canopy on private property by limiting shade tree removal and ensuring that shade trees are replaced or replanted in appropriate locations. We would also look to develop strategies for maintaining, reestablishing, and enhancing tree canopies over public rights-of-way. And then we're also going to survey the city's tree canopy and set a goal to increase the canopy coverage in accordance with Clearwater Greenprint 2.0. Any questions on this?
How does state law impact the ability to create something like this to save trees on private property?
So I think we'd have to look into that as we go and develop, whether they be code standards or other methods to do that. But this really just sets us to take a look at that and see what we can do. I know, our tree removal, they have to be a certain score. I think Matt Anderson can probably talk to that more if that came up, but there's a certain score. If it doesn't meet that, then it has to stay.
So there have been tree issues lately, and is this has there always been policies about tree removal with the scores and all that?
So tree removal is in our code. This objective is actually a new objective that relates specifically to tree canopies. And the previous objective was in our current comprehensive plan, but it's very high level. It's not as in-depth as what we're proposing here. So we've added additional policies to that objective.
It has been, it is within Greenprint 2.0 as well, so it wasn't necessarily in the comprehensive plan, but the conversation about canopies is included in Greenprint.
Our next environmental goal is QP3. This is a new one as well. This relates to our causeways, Courtney Campbell Memorial Causeway, our city gateways, and our view corridors. So this one has 3 objectives, and there'll be a map as well. So our first objective really deals with preserving the aesthetic and character of our causeways. Objective 3.2 deals with maintaining our water views, and then objective 3.3 is to preserve our view corridors. So our first objective has 5 policies, and within that, we would look to continue to support the Florida Scenic Highway designation, current physical cross-sectional character, and scenic view and natural coastal style landscaping of the Courtney Campbell Causeway. For the Memorial Causeway, we would look to continue to maintain the iconic native Florida landscaping. And then lastly, we would continue to promote educational programs and community partnerships to preserve natural and recreational features on the causeways, as well as continue to work with volunteer groups for litter cleanup days to maintain the natural environment of the causeways. There's only one policy for now under Objective 3.2, and that deals with considering developing a corridor beautification project to enhance the image of Clearwater. And then our view corridors, there's 2 policies, and it goes with this map here, which is a draft map. But we would like to ensure our view corridors are not negatively impacted during site plan review or land use decisions, as well as preserve and maintain public access and right-of-way ends that are protected by our city charter. So this is a draft map of our view corridors, and as you can see, they're really typically centered around views of the water. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and if you have any suggestions on different view corridors, we would be happy to add those in.
Oh, I do have a question about the, I guess it's near the Bayview area by the Bayside Bridge.
Yes.
And along that coastline, there were a lot of mangroves before where you could not see the water. And then there's been some development, and then they've cut them back to, I don't know, like 3 feet. How is that impacting like the environmental, the ecosystem? And also, mangroves essentially help to create a barrier for stormwater surge and impact from storms and everything. And so is that what this move is?
I'll have our favorite resident expert here, Sarah, again.
So unfortunately, city doesn't have the permitting for mangroves, so we don't really have a say in how they're trimmed. So those particular mangroves are on private property. So they got a permit from Pinellas County to be able to trim them. But they are trimmed very precisely by a certified mangrove trimmer. They're only allowed to trim a certain amount of it, to trim to a certain height, so the actual health of the mangroves is not disrupted. If they're existing mangroves, which in that area they have an extensive root system, and so that's part of the factor in how they determine how high or low, they can trim them to make sure that their root system is not disturbed when they're being trimmed, so they're not stressed. I mean, if you have, a 12-foot mangrove and you cut it down to 7 feet, it's not going to provide as much storm surge if you have those high waves coming in that are higher than 7 feet, but you still have all of the root system of the mangroves, you still have the rhizomes and all the roots going down that's going to block that wave action, that's still going to protect them. So they still provide considerable protection from storm surge and tides and erosion. It just wouldn't be as much if they were not disturbed and they were 12 feet high. And they wouldn't provide as much of a food web being maintained. But in some of those areas, like along the bayside and along that area, like those mangroves have been just so disturbed by other people and people cutting through them and things like that anyway. So I don't know that they were providing as much habitat as left alone mangroves would anyway. But yeah, like the permitting process that Pinellas County goes through assesses all of that to make sure that they're not going to die and they're still maintaining a level of protection.
They sequester carbon as well, more than trees.
The road that goes to Safety Harbor when you come off of the Courtney Campbell Causeway, I don't see that listed as a view corridor, but that's a pretty scenic road as well. I don't know if it looked like it's within the boundaries of that are shown.
Yeah, it is, and we can definitely add that to the map in our next iteration.
I can't remember the name of that road right now. But
This
All
is
right.
just our initial attempt at getting
sorry?
something.
Philippi Parkway?
Oh, yeah, Philippi Parkway. There we go. Yeah, real easy. Right on the,
Okay, yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. If you have any other ideas later, you can just email us. Okay. Environmental goals, CCM1. So this will probably get into more of our natural environment. So we look to continue to protect, enhance, and conserve our natural resources within the city. And there are 4 objectives for this goal as well. So the first one relates to protecting those natural resources. So mangroves will be one of those, as well as our wetlands and wildlife habitats. The third objective would be to protect our city-owned water wells, and then lastly, we would look to manage our stormwater discharge. So objective 1.1 has 14 total policies under it, but at a general level, they really speak to continue to protect, restore, preserve, and enhance our dunes, beaches, and our natural shorelines. We'd also look to utilize natural vegetation when restoring our dunes and beaches, and then we're also going to continue to direct development away from environmentally sensitive areas. Objective 1.2 has 10 policies. So we're going to continue to designate environmentally sensitive wetlands, floodplains, or other environmentally significant areas as preservation on our future land use map. We're also going to continue to protect natural and mitigated wetlands, conservation lands, marine life, shoreline vegetation, and wildlife habitats, including endangered species and species of special concern. And you mentioned it earlier, Jared, but we're also going to continue to support the Coopers Point Water Quality Project. 1.3, there are 4 policies, but generally speaking, we're just going to continue to administer our well field protection ordinance.
Can you go back to 1.2 for a moment?
Sure.
I've observed a number of city properties, some of them on the coastal, that have a fair number of invasive plants that are, one is next to the Community Sailing Center on Sand Key. There's Brazilian peppers amid the mangroves. Some years ago, the city undertook a wonderful restoration project on Sand Key down at the Bay Park, where there were Brazilian peppers, carrotwood, Australian pine, took them all out and did a beautiful restoration. That mangrove habitat has increased. But I think it should be an objective to protect those city properties that have those natural resources from invasive vegetation, which is a significant issue here in Pinellas County.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely look to see where that fits best, but we can definitely add a policy to, remove invasive species, whether it be in the wetland areas or anywhere else. Yeah.
Right.
We can definitely add that in. Okay, and objective 1.4, for this one we have 12 policies related to stormwater discharge. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we're going to continue to utilize approved watershed management plans. We'd look to incorporate water quality protection and enhancement criteria into city stormwater management plans. We'd also consider requiring stormwater plans to utilize natural features, low-impact development techniques, or other techniques that would trap stormwater sediments and improve stormwater runoff. And then last but not least, this is in our Parks and Public Places chapter. This is Objective 2.3, really speaks to preserving our natural open space areas. And for this, there are 5 policies. A few high-level ones would be to create green permeable surfaces in easements or traffic islands. We would continue to protect lands designated as recreation open space or preservation and look to designate appropriate city-owned lands as such. We're also going to provide open space properties which have the diversity of resources necessary for nature study and enjoyment.
So that's very high level.
Yes.
So going along Gulf Bay Boulevard, heading west towards 19, on the right side, there's a little tiny sliver of undeveloped property between the M. Scott and, I forget what's on the other side of it. And that's a little section of undeveloped. But that, I'm assuming that land belongs to somebody, but it is undeveloped. So this would not, nothing like this would apply to an undeveloped piece of property like that, to preserve an undeveloped piece of property.
If it's city-owned, we could take a look at.
So we're only talking about city-owned?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's private property rights that we have to respect. So if it's a city-owned property that's undeveloped, we want to keep it that way. We could definitely look into doing that. I know our Parks and Recreation Department has purchased quite a few parcels of land to do just that. So that's something that is in our Parks and Recreation chapter. But we would look to do that to any currently city-owned property, or maybe there's a chance of purchase of property.
Yeah.
All right, now our next steps. We will be bringing full plan drafts back to the public for public meetings. We're going to hold those on June 27th and June 29th. June 27th is at North Greenwood Recreation Center. June 29th is at the Countryside Library. Then also, we've held meetings with our Community Development Board. We've had work sessions on May 10th and May 16th. And this was to give our board an opportunity to ask questions and to give the board members a chance to not have to deal with this at once. We'll be taking the entire draft plan to the Community Development Board on August 15th, and it'll be a full public hearing. And they'll actually be making a recommendation to City Council at that time. And then City Council, we have 2 work sessions scheduled with them, June 5th and June 12th. Those will be to go over the 5 plan chapters that we have drafted currently. We're anticipating holding our first hearing in September, on September 21st. And then it's anticipated that our second hearing, our adoption hearing, will occur on December 7th. We're still determining which level of review we have to go through at the state, whether it's a 30-day review or a 60-day review. So depending on what they tell us, the earliest we could adopt this would be December 7th, but there is a chance that it might have to go into early 2024. And with that, I'd like to direct you to our project website, clearwater2045.com. We do have all of these draft chapters up there currently, along with some of the presentations that we gave previously to our public. And then if there's any questions, you can...
Can you go back one? I'm
Sure.
sorry. And
Yeah.
one more. The timeline, the full plan will be presented June 27th to the public, but the council's going to vote on it earlier in the month?
No. So we're
Sorry.
presenting to our city council work sessions on June
Okay.
5th and June 12th.
Those are just presentations. They're not going to go on to...
Yeah, those are
Okay,
just work
okay.
sessions. We're going to do Quality Places Mobility June 5th, and then...
Okay, and then first hearing in September.
And then first hearing will be
Okay,
the actual
okay.
full hearing after it's gone to Community Development Board.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have questions.
Yes.
So of all these policies that you have, are they all brand new? Are they building on, I mean, this sounds like a huge effort.
It is a very huge effort, yes. So what we did is we've used our existing comprehensive plan as a starting point. And if there is a policy from our current plan that has been done, we didn't carry it over. So we use that as a starting point. So we do have a good number of new policies in here, new objectives, new goals. But there are also a good number that are in our current plan that still apply. And in that case, we just updated any sort of data, any dates, and we made sure that we've changed it from the city shall do this to evaluate doing this.
Do you see any philosophical changes between the previous comprehensive plan and this comprehensive plan?
No philosophical changes.
Okay. And are you getting any county, state, federal money to help support these changes?
For the project itself?
Yeah.
No. No, we have a
It's all
consultant.
Clearwater money?
We've hired HDR. They've helped us with our quality places and mobility chapters and some of the early data gathering and public engagement. But the parks and public places, the conservation, coastal management, support services, and the formatting of all the chapters has been done in-house by us.
Well, it just seems like there's a lot of federal money floating around here this year that you might be able to take advantage of, especially for the environmental stuff. But anyway, and once you start this, you must have some timeline and tracking system in place to see what policies have been implemented, and what your timeline is for rolling those policies out.
Yeah, so this project is going to look into 2045, or out to 2045. And then this will really tie into our capital improvements. So that'll actually go into the budgetary process when we go forward with this, whether it be next year or in 5 years. But these really give us the teeth to put any sort of project that we need to do, whether it's a stormwater project that Sarah would do or something that Micah might do in his department. It really gives them the teeth to take it in front of council and say, hey, we need to do this. It's in our comprehensive plan, and we would like, money to do that.
Once the comprehensive plan is approved, I assume the final approval is by city council. Suppose they want to make changes to it. How, is that through these processes, or does anything have to go out for referendum?
So nothing here would have to go out to referendum. So if we take it to our first council reading in September, and they don't like something that we have, we can absolutely change it between first reading and second reading. And it also goes to the state for review. There's a number of state agencies that also provide review. So we built in time for them as well, to not only review, but to address any sort of comments or changes that they might have as well. And if they would like to change something, we would absolutely change it, whether it be before first reading from our presentations now, or after first reading between second reading, or even at second reading if they've had some sort of change in policy.
Great. This has been a great presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Did you say it's available at Clearwater 2045 at myclearwater.com?
Just Clearwater2045.com. That's our project website.
2045.
Yeah, but the Clearwater2045 at myclearwater.com, that is our project email. So if you have any questions or anything that comes up later, feel free to direct it to that email, and we'll take a look at it.
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any further.
I will be remiss if I don't ask this. Within this, what we were presented and in the conservation and coastal management, none of the policies in the plan will infringe on the current state of the coastal construction line?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not proposing to touch that. And honestly, I don't think we really deal with that. I think that is more of a federal thing or state thing that we just have to implement.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then also, if there's any comments from the audience, will you be able to hang on to answer any questions?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, are there any comments from the audience? Please step forward and state your name. Yeah.
Thank you, board members. Bill Johnson, 2694 Redford Court West. From what you've heard, you know that so much of this plan is connected to the environment, and it's also connected to the future of Clearwater and the viability of us going forward. Looking at the vision, one thing that I would highlight is the vision statement. We've lost the element of uniquely beautiful from that vision statement. That's something that's been here for about the last 20 years, and before that we used to call it sparkling Clearwater. Uniquely beautiful trees, the parks, the water views, and that kind of flows through the rest of the comments I'm going to make. In the sustainable water, which is I think CCM 1.4, the actual water quality of Clearwater Harbor. That our name is Clearwater, clear water. And it's not that way, and I understand it used to be a lot better. And so to me, this would be an overarching goal that could be in here. And it ties in with things like getting rid of the septic tanks in the Alligator Creek area or the Stevenson's Creek area. You mentioned the sewer spills. Back in 2016, when we had a spill at the Headwaters plant, we were assured that there would be no single point of failure in that facility. It happened. Also in Quality Places 5.5.1, code enforcement. Code enforcement is really critical for neighborhoods in maintaining the property values of the adjacent properties and also the quality of the neighborhoods. There's an element in there about code enforcement, but it doesn't tie into the importance of property values of the adjoining neighborhood. There's a reference to evaluating the feasibility of elevating roadways. You mentioned Courtney Campbell Causeway. Back in '48, they added 4 feet to that, but the question is, what's the cost of doing all this elevation? In SM2, the mobility, the trail, we have so much opportunity to embrace our trails throughout Clearwater like Dunedin has. And it's there, but it could be stronger. And then lastly, might want to consider, whoops, did I finish?
Please.
I just thought about it today. On the Courtney Campbell Causeway, on the north side of the causeway between the two bridges, there's an area where there's not many mangroves. There's some Brazilian peppers, but it's becoming more of a beach area, and we might need to figure out how to restrict that along there. This is so many opportunities. Thank you for considering it.
Thank you very much, Bill. All right, any other comments from the audience? Please step forward and state your name. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hamilton Abreu. First, thank you to Mr. Brotherton and Mrs. I forgot your name, for the lovely presentation. I also want to take advantage and say the garbage guys do a great job. The guys that pick up the trees, I love those guys. They've been very nice. Every now and then I give them a bottle of water, but those guys are really, really work hard. I have a blue tag on my tree. I'm not an arborist, and I was wondering if does that mean that my tree in front of my house is going to get knocked down? I think it's in pretty good shape. You know, this may be a question for later on, or I don't know who I'll have to give the information to. I got his email address, but I don't know who should I address that to.
We're going to talk about the tree plan in our next item, and then you can address the question to the,
Thank you. The other thing was, I am not an arborist. I also want to say thank you to the people who give out trees. I got 2. But I need help to maintain them. I wanted to see if I take a couple of pictures and email it to somebody, they could tell me what I'm doing wrong. Am I overwatering them or something? Is that something that will go to this gentleman?
No, I think there's, who is here to, I'll be presenting the tree. Oh, okay, Chuck, okay.
If I could get his information before the end of the day, that'd be great. I don't know if this is the right avenue, but there's a project on Cleveland Street. There used to be presentations that were being done on the Hacienda Corraleja every second Monday, and I used to get a little pamphlet letting me know when those meetings are happening. I haven't received that lately.
I'm not familiar.
Okay. And there's a little news flyer that gets delivered with my water bill that has a lot of good information. I didn't get any of this in that. I don't know if that's the right revenue or the right way that you guys advertise things, but I love that little newsletter. So if things like this can be added to that or some other way to communicate to us, that would be great if that's at all possible.
I can give you a comment on that because I have a water bill too, but I went electronic for my water bill, and so I get a statement, I'm prepaid, so I get a statement with a link to the sunshine lines that you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you, that's what it's called.
Yeah, so I don't get a paper bill,
Okay.
but I get a link to the electronic version of Sunshine Lines.
Okay. And the last thing was rec centers. The pools don't open until, I think, like second week of June. Is that something that I can ask somebody to change at this forum?
The Parks and Rec Advisory Board, I think, would be an appropriate place to start, or the City Council is another.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comment from the audience? Please step forward. State your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi again, Brian Beckman. It was one specific question. I don't know if it related specifically to the objective of PPP 2.3 or not, and specifically on open green spaces. So take like the landings that was on a referendum before. Not sure if that would be included in what was stated as being protected or preserved, but there's those kind of open green spaces that do have habitat on them, that I would hope that we would include those for protecting and preserving, similar to many of our other spaces that might be more ecologically diverse, but still yet important.
Certainly. Thank you very much. All right. Any other comments? All right. We'll move on to our next item, 3.4, review of the right-of-way tree plan.
Thank you. My name is Chuck Lane. I'm the interim Public Works Director. So I do not have a tree plan for you. I want to talk to you about some fundamentals and get your opinion on and your thoughts on how we might look at this. So in October last year, the Public Works Department was created, and responsibility for trees within city rights-of-way shifted from the Parks and Rec Department to the Public Works Department. I think the learning curve got a little bit ahead of us. We ran into some very public-facing issues, as you know. I think the crux of the issue was really lack of communication with property owners. I think robust communication would have headed off, the few issues that really got hot. But we learned we also needed to make some other changes to how we go about rating trees and removing hazardous trees. So we've learned some things. So just a quick explanation of how we go about tree assessment and removal. We've divided the city up into 5 zones, approximately 4,000 trees in each zone, so we have approximately 20,000 trees throughout city rights-of-way across the city. We rate trees on a 0 to 6 rating scale. 0 is a dead tree. 6 is a specimen tree, absolutely worthy of preservation. A tree rated 1 is a tree in decline. It's diseased or has other issues that will cause it to eventually be rated a 0 tree. What we've done is we've removed all trees rated 0 and 1. And it's a matter of public safety. If you have a dead tree in the wild, perhaps in one of our parks, we would just let it decay. We wouldn't remove it. Even a dead tree provides habitat in the wild. So there would be no reason to remove a tree like that. In the right-of-way, that tree fails, it can cause injury, it can cause damage. So that's why we need to remove them from the rights-of-way. One of the things we ran into is invasive trees were automatically rated 1, regardless of health and structure.
Yikes.
That wasn't me, was it? So the most significant issue that came to a head was when we removed 2 healthy camphor trees from a property. They were partially within the right-of-way, and they were partially on private property. On January 20th, after this problem came to light, council directed staff to pause tree assessment and removal activities until we worked through some things. So really, what did we learn from all this? We really need to shift how we evaluate invasive trees. There are 4 invasive trees that are listed in our code that you don't need a permit to remove because they're nuisance exotic invasive species. And those trees are Metaleuca, Brazilian pepper, Australian pine, and Chinese tallow. Those trees will continue to be rated 1 regardless of health and structure. What we would like to do is rate all other invasive species based on health and structure and not automatically deem them a 1 to be removed. How do we deal with shared trees? Trees that are partially within the right-of-way, partially on private property. Well, if you think about it, if it's partially on private property, we need to access that private property to remove that tree. We need to get the property owner's permission to do that. So we need to open up a dialogue with that property owner. So there will be a robust communication with that property owner on trying to get that tree removed. And we would need permission from that property owner to access the property, remove the tree. If the property owner refuses to do that, what we would probably need to do is handle that through a regulatory perspective with our municipal code enforcement board. But hopefully, those types of issues we can work through by communicating with the property owner. We need to create, as I mentioned, more robust communication protocols, not just with shared trees, but with trees that are fully in the right-of-way. It can be disturbing for a homeowner to come home one evening and find a tree gone that they didn't want removed. It doesn't matter, it doesn't mean we're not necessarily going to remove it, but we can have the conversation, and that property owner can better understand what we need to do and why we need to do it. And we also, one of the recommendations of the former Public Works Director at the January 20th meeting was to create a tree planting policy. So, some of the things that we've worked on, and these are examples. I'm going to put it on this overhead here. This is an example of something we can do to help create space for a tree. So one of the things that we're up against is putting trees in the right-of-way is not good for the tree, and there's no other way to say it. A tree that might live 150 years uninhibited in the wild might live 60 years in a right-of-way because of the conflicts, because of sidewalks, because of utilities, because of overhead lines. So immediately, if we're going to decide to plant trees in the rights-of-way, we immediately need to come to some sort of compromise about how we address trees, because it's not the perfect habitat for a tree. But we can we can help to create space and make habitat better for a tree by doing some things like this. This is an example of a sidewalk. You get a linear sidewalk along a right-of-way. We can move that sidewalk, curve that sidewalk, make it more, create more radius for that tree, right? So that's an example. This is pretty much the same example. Put it up there anyway. There's also an option that we can, remove a sidewalk. You'll see here a sidewalk here, it's been removed. We have more space for planting trees. Sidewalks don't necessarily need on both sides of the road. So really kind of this is another one. This is a bulb out into the road, which would create some traffic calming. Also would create a little bit more radius for a tree. These are just options. These are considerations. These are ways we can think of, what can we do, to create space. That's really what it is. It's trying to be creative so we can, be able to plant trees, as we remove them. So continuing. So this leads us down a path of, what I think are conflicting priorities, right? As I mentioned earlier, planting a canopy tree in a right-of-way provides a poor habitat for that tree. Accent trees are less of a concern, right? But they don't provide the canopy that many people desire. Tree maintenance can be very costly. If you have an oak tree in your home and you've had it trimmed by an arborist, you know how much it costs. You might have one or two trees in your yard. We have 20,000 trees in our canopy, in our city. So it's from a very legitimate perspective to say that we should consider these financial implications, which may cause us to limit the amount of canopy trees in rights-of-way. But there are facts that trees provide benefits, which legitimizes the perspective that trees, maintaining our current canopy level by planting trees as we remove them, or increasing our canopy level. That's obviously a legitimate perspective because there are benefits, and you are all very well aware of those benefits of trees. They reduce the heat island impact. They reduce our carbon footprint. I think you mentioned that earlier. They provide air quality, noise abatement, replenishment of oxygen. They make neighborhoods more attractive and increase property values. Our community development code encourages, and you heard that today, encourages the preservation and enhancement of our rights-of-way and right-of-way canopy. Greenpoint 2.0 recognizes many of these benefits and encourages us to set an increased canopy goal. So we have a very legitimate but competing perspectives on how we should manage trees within our rights-of-way. So this is where I'm seeking your feedback. So I'd like you to consider two questions as I turn it over to you. One, what are your priorities with respect to what our right-of-way tree canopy should look like? And two, when you consider the reasons why not to put trees in our rights-of-way versus the benefits that trees provide, how do you think we can create a right-of-way tree program that achieves the appropriate balance? So with that, I'll turn it over to you. I'll take questions. I have Matt Anderson here today. Matt's an arborist with the Parks and Rec Department. He can answer any technical questions that you may have.
Great. Thank you for coming in, and thanks for working on this. I am sure this has been an educational project to go through, to put together. I think You mentioned utilities. Is that going to be something that is considered when putting trees back? That some of the trees that have deteriorated or are in decline are because they've been under utility lines and cut a certain way, and maybe that shouldn't, we shouldn't plant trees back in that same place again, and maybe find better places to plant trees.
Yeah, when we plant a tree, we definitely need to do a utility locate and make sure we're planting them in an appropriate place. On top of a utility is not an appropriate place.
Or under.
Yeah, Duke Energy has guidelines for offset of power lines, yes.
Well, I also have noticed pine trees in the right-of-way in Clearwater, and my understanding is that hardwoods aren't supposed to be in the right-of-way at all, as a rule, as a general rule. I don't know if that's the case or not. Is that?
We have a lot of trees like that in our rights. We have oaks, there are pine trees, there are a lot of, it's not just palms, it's not just accent trees.
I think specifically.
There are hardwood trees.
Yeah. And then the other item was in terms of, like I said, planting back in the same place. Maybe it is a place like a park where there need to be more trees, and you plant more trees there rather than in an environment that they won't succeed. So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts. I'll open it up to the rest of the board.
I have a question, because I have this situation in my front yard. I planted 3 pines 30 years ago, and I had had a utility assessment done for another reason. So I found out in the last 2 years that they were in the right-of-way, but there was nothing to indicate to me that there was any right-of-way. So my question is, how is a person supposed to know what the right-of-way is in their yard?
Width of the right-of-way varies throughout the city. A lot of people, when they buy a home, they're required by their lender to get a survey done. You can refer to that survey. That can be helpful. That'll show you the boundaries of your property. Really, the right-of-way line is the front boundary of your property.
Well, these are set back 10 feet in the middle of a side yard, so anyway, so I think that's one thing that people don't know, that they're planting trees in the right-of-way, because I don't think people go back and check their survey, although that's a helpful suggestion. But I think that's a big issue. People have to know where the right-of-way is to know to avoid it.
I think also, to your point, you could plant a tree in your property and the branches extend into the right-of-way, and then that would cause problems where the city might come and remove a tree as well that is actually in your property, but it goes out into the right-of-way.
That may be, but the explanation I was given when the arborist people came out was that the middle of anyway, I don't want to talk about my personal situation, but as I said, it's hard to know where the right-of-way is.
We have the ability to identify the boundary. We have survey crews that can go out and identify a boundary.
Yeah, but people aren't going to do that before they plant a tree.
Right.
They should.
Well, when you have Arbor Day and you're giving away trees, and you're not telling people, check your right-of-way.
You couldn't plant a tree on your neighbor's property. You can't plant a tree within the city's right-of-way. It's the same thing.
Right, but you don't
It's
know where the
knowledge.
right-of-way is.
I owned a surveying company before I retired here to Clearwater. So I understand these things, dealt with them career-wise in that fashion. I'd like to say I really support the approach toward the invasive trees, the way you're going. The 4 that you named, I volunteer at the Florida Botanical Gardens, and we try to keep those gardens in the main garden areas free of those 4 trees, but they're ubiquitous in this county. And the amount of seed source that you get from Brazilian pepper and Australian pine is phenomenal. So, and then evaluating the others by their condition makes a lot of sense, because some of them, they may be a little bit of an exotic. They're not the 4 nasty guys. And I think that's a wonderful way to approach things. I'd like to just ask a little bit, and it bears on the situation that Marita had, which is the examples that you showed us all had the trunk of the tree within the right-of-way. And I think there was note about the tree canopies. It might be on an individual property owner's land, but you have some limbs that are hazards. They might be into utilities, whether they're overhead, The root systems may be compromising sidewalks or other utilities that the city has in place. And that presents a more difficult, I think, situation for the Public Works Department and management of proper stewardship of the streets, the utilities, and the tree canopy as well. And those are the situations, I think, that raised a lot of concern with some of the communities, at least a couple of the streets that I visited when I was alerted to some of the email chains related to that. But I think better understanding of the right-of-ways and
Trees that are on private property that hang, we get calls from bus companies because they're scraping.
Right.
And we have an urban forestry team that takes care of those calls, and we'll go out and we'll clean that up. We're not able to remove the tree, it's not in the right-of-way, the trunk of the tree isn't.
right.
We can control the limbs that hang over the right-of-way, just like a property owner can do that on his property.
I appreciate your comments, John, but I hadn't finished speaking when you started speaking.
Excuse me.
So you asked us what our priorities are and how to create a right-of-way policy. Aren't those your two basic questions?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think, based on my experience, I think education about right-of-way is really important. And I think somehow it's got to be flagged to people that when they plan on planting a tree, it's got to be made clear to them that they have to investigate the right-of-way, some public communication about right-of-way and planting, so people don't plant in the right-of-way.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as priorities, I mean, aesthetic value and the benefit, the ecological benefits that trees bring are very important to me. I remember going to a presentation about Crest Lake Park, and the arborist told the group there that they had to protect people from trees. And I thought, well, that's an odd way of looking at things, because it's odd to me. So I would say that maybe it's the health of the trees and the health of the community that are the priorities.
I would like, can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So I like the right-of-way, moving the sidewalk to help support the vitality of the trees that are healthy, that are existing. And then the invasive, I support the removing of those, that's great. I would like to suggest replacing them with food-bearing trees, so to support the comprehensive plan for creating urban agriculture and having a food production, so like avocado trees, mango trees, trees like that can provide not only a benefit for carbon sequestration and as well as canopies and food for the community.
One of the things with fruit trees we have to be cautious of is tripping hazards. These trees hang over sidewalks. Things that fall from the trees can cause hazards, so that's something we have to be cognizant of. Would you have anything to add, Matt, about that?
Good afternoon, Matthew Anderson, Parks and Recreation. One thing to consider when you're looking at various fruit species to be planted in a right-of-way situation, you do have the concern of trip hazards, but you also have, currently, like avocado was mentioned, there's been a huge decline in them. We've got a small beetle that passes disease around. It's almost wiped them out. So, I mean, as the agricultural advances come to where they find species that could be used to replace those, like a better avocado that's more resistant. Same with citrus. Citrus greening has just decimated the citrus production in the state. So I think as the agricultural advancements come, that could be something we could look at, but currently, depending on the species, it would be very species dependent what we could put back. But I think it could be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by an urban forester at that point, when that's put in place. So.
Yeah, I think the locations would also have to be, like you said, case by case, because you wouldn't want a fruit tree by streets that are getting stormwater runoff from all of those, that type of water. I wouldn't think that would be amenable to.
Arborist mantra is kind of right tree, right place, and there's a lot behind that.
And to what Marita said about planting trees in the right-of-way, I think historically the cities kind of look the other way when homeowners have planted trees in the right-of-way. I know on my street and in my neighborhood, there are neighbors that have planted numerous trees over the years in the right-of-way, and I don't know who would call to remove a tree anyway, but I don't know that there's anyone that goes out, and I don't know that there would be an enforcement arm to, look and drive down the street and say, oh, there wasn't a tree there today, there is now, and then go dig it up or cut it down or whatever. But I think that's also a challenge, is that even neighbors who know this is the right-of-way are still going to plant trees in those spaces. And anyway, I don't know if there's any other comment from the board?
I'd like to address the priorities that were referenced. And I think I like your approach to the canopy look, in that it requires, with 20,000 trees, a lot of stewardship. And, being responsive, and the kind of care that you mentioned, with the buses, or, just construction vehicles that come in with higher heights. And it's I think, a look that everybody appreciates when you come down those tree-lined streets that have the overhanging branches, and that's beautiful. And trying to achieve that should be a priority and a goal. And it's going to take a lot of work and communication, as you noted. But a program perhaps that with that tree program that are available occasionally, so people can come and get a tree or two and plant it on their property, might be some informational placard, or just something that you can hand to them about making sure that they put it on their property, not on the neighbor's property, or within the city's right-of-way. And also other information on, how big these trees will get over a period of time. Once they reach maturity, and, looks nice when it's a sapling, 1.5, 2 inches, and it's 6 or 8 foot tall. But when that thing is 50 or 60 feet tall, and it can be a hazard to the homeowner as well. So it's the proper care, putting the right tree at the right location, and for a particular purpose. And, that does require a lot of work with the arborists, and sounds like you have quite a staff to do that.
I will say that, that the care it takes, and the staff, the amount of staff, the resources we have, that's a challenge, right? I mean, there is no way, I'm pretty confident in saying, that we could maintain and increase the current canopy in a responsible manner with our current resources. So ultimately, we're going to have a conversation, we're going to need to have a conversation about, how we balance the financial effects of that with, those social and environmental ones, just like we try to do with all of our sustainability elements. So, this is kind of the start of the conversation, but that piece is one that we need to get a good handle on, so we can, accurately express to you all and others, what the cost benefit of all of this really looks like.
What's your timeline to have something presented to council?
I don't know the answer to that. We'd like to do it sooner than later. We hope to get to council in June. That's not going to happen. Okay. But I would hope in the next month or two we could possibly get something to council.
At least in a first step part of it, I think. I think that there's probably a multi-step piece to this. Because really, to ask either you all or the council to make some of these decisions without having the full picture of the financial element, it's hard to do, right? But there are things that we can do on the front end here, and then really make some very informed decisions moving forward.
Certainly.
Would you like some written feedback from us on the 2 questions you asked us about the prioritization?
That would be terrific.
Then could you send those questions out? I wasn't able to write fast enough to write them.
Yes.
All right, great. Are there any other questions from the board?
No.
Are there any questions from the audience? Please come forward. Thank you very much. State your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hamilton Group. Again, I wanted to ask about the boot tag and he's gonna reach out to me, but can you give me an explanation why there's a blue tag and, how it gets evaluated and all that kind of stuff?
Thank you.
Matthew Anderson, Parks and Recreation. Currently, we had, as Chuck said, broke the city into 5 zones. An inventory was done on Zone 1 and partially on Zone 2. So every tree in the right-of-way that had been inventoried at that point received a blue tag, which is basically like the social security number for that tree, and it coincides in the inventory. So essentially, when you call, say, hey, I've got tree 4800 in my yard, we have the ability to look that tree up and give you the species, the diameter, breast height, the condition rating of that tree. So that tag helps us identify the tree, particularly, and here's the zone map that the city was broken down into, but it just allows us to be able to provide that information easier when a citizen calls. There was some misinformation going around. If you had a blue tag, that your tree was going to be removed. That was dispelled pretty quickly through some council meetings and things earlier on in the year. But that basically breaks down why the tags are there, is to help us be able to provide that information, not only to our citizens, but our contractors and ourselves when we're making decisions on trees.
Just an identification.
Correct.
Thank you.
Can I make a recommendation for what it's worth?
Yes.
I had blue tags show up on my trees over a year ago, and I had no idea what was going on. I asked a couple people, nobody knew. So if you left a flyer at the door and said, this is the city, we've tagged your trees as part of our project, and this is what it means, I think that would be enormously helpful to homeowners.
Absolutely. And just like Chuck said, that interface with the citizens, public outreach, those are all things that will be improved moving forward through this urban forestry management plan that is provided. So, any other questions?
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other comment from the audience? All right. We'll move on with our next item then. Item 3.5, review near-term items with the EAB. Thank you very much, Chuck and Matt.
All right, so, so as with the other meetings, I've just tried to lay out some of the next conversations that we have on the schedule for the next 2 meetings. Now, we don't have another special meeting coming up. We have our regular meeting that is going to be in July. Right now, we've got a couple different items that we're planning on having some conversation about. One of them is the legislative priorities in preparation for next legislative season. This will be an opportunity for you all to express some of your legislative priorities as a board, so that we can then communicate that to the city council. So when they're considering their legislative priorities, they can consider yours as well. We're also going to have some budget review because we are in budget season right now. This is probably the best opportunity, at least right now. I would probably say we would want to try to move it up a little bit in future years, just because of how the timing works. Sometimes it's a little easier to affect things if you know about them a little earlier than July. But the nature of this year has been such that we haven't been able to go there. So, but the intent is to move it forward in the discussion. I also want to look at hopefully maybe finishing up the conversation about our playbook implementation, coming to some agreement on what that looks like. I believe Ms. Wentworth will be back at that meeting as well. So any questions y'all have, please just let me know, and we'll try to answer those best we can, or any suggestions you have for change, and then we'll bring those forward as well. Hoping to have some conversation about the herbicides and pesticides. Looking to get some additional information from the county. So that's the one that, it could slip if we don't have enough information, but we're going to do our best to try to get that sooner rather than later, because I know it's an important item for the board. We'll also
I think we needed information from the city too, from Parks and Rec.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, I thought you said the county, sorry.
Yeah, and the county. So
okay.
we're hoping to have both.
Okay,
a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah. Synergistics, as I said earlier in the meeting, we will have our 1 full year, actually we'll have a little more, but we'll have at least 1 full year of data, so we can show you kind of what the impact of bringing that group on has been, and what it looks like as far as our resource use cost to the city, but also the carbon footprint impact as well, those reductions. We also plan to come forward with some of our solar plans. We've been working on sort of a implementation rollout for the ARPA and Department of Energy funds that we've got. We've get a pretty good idea of how we want to do it, considering our, our resource restrictions as far as engineering is concerned and general services are, we take care of a lot of our buildings. Well, I think we've got a good rollout plan for that. So we'll plan to bring that forward to you all as well in July to have some conversation, show you what that looks like, and get any feedback you might have on that. And then moving into October, Sarah mentioned a little bit earlier the Cooper's Bayou design. Hopefully that October time will hold, as she mentioned. And she's hoping to get some input from you all with the engineers when we have that conversation. And then, of course, the fee bait is another item that we want to try to work on this summer and hopefully bring forward something come October for some conversation by the board.
The what? I didn't understand what you said.
The fee bait that we talked about in the previous meetings, it's an element of green print.
Okay.
Yep. And those are really the ones we have coming up. If you have any other ones, happy to hear them, or if you have any thoughts or comments.
I think there was Marine and Aviation, they're doing an update on their master plan, and Parks and Rec are doing an update on their master plan.
Yeah, the plan is to, as those master plans come through, we will add them in as well.
So those are further out than...
I need to get an update on the Parks and Recreation one, but if they are, we will not let it be too late, I'll promise you that. So if it needs to go on to October, because there is a December finish date, we will have it in October.
And I noticed City Council, there's a new rendering for the fixed base operation at the air park. I saw it on the agenda item for tomorrow night. It's different than the rendering I saw before for the air park.
Okay.
And I'd be curious I don't know if you guys would be interested to know what the design or where things are with redoing the air park, so with the new operator and everything.
I'll get with Marine and Aviation on that. To my understanding, they do not have a agreed upon design or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
I think what was provided the other day related to the grant at the Monday meeting.
Yeah.
It was the grant funding in essence to allow for design. So we haven't gotten into that quite yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the rendering that I saw looked different than a previous rendering for out there, but they both look.
I'll find out where that came from. I'm not sure what the source was for that.
All right.
Ready for 100. If we could get any sort of update on how that's integrated into plans.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Sea turtle nesting season started this month. Are we going to still have the superboat races in October during the?
Yes, I did get your message about that, and we'll get something on for the next one.
All right.
Wait, you got the message, and what will happen?
Oh, I sent in. The city sent out a release about the start of sea turtle nesting season at the beginning of the month. So
Right.
I just sent that email to Micah as a follow-up on where things were with our letter about the superboat races during sea turtle nesting season.
I thought that letter had been delivered to the council.
I believe it has been, yes.
And that's it.
So are there any next steps on that?
Well, I think that's what I need to talk to city admin about.
Yeah, we just wanted to know what the follow-up was or whatever. So, all right, very well. Anything else, John?
No,
Okay. Any comment from the audience? All right. Then we'll move on to our next item, old business items. Does anyone have any old business? I think we went over a lot of that with the near-term items for our next meeting, so. We'll move on to our next item then, director's report.
Yep, I'm good.
All right, I think, we covered that with the last item as well. All right, and then our last item, board members to be heard. Does anyone have anything to say? Sheila?
No.
Marita?
The only comment I have is about, and I may be taking it out of your mouth, John, but it's notification of meetings. It's hard for me to keep track of when the next meetings are, and I would so appreciate some sort of yearly calendar and then a notification a month, 2 weeks before, sometime before, I get an email, but that the EAB agenda, but it's not because I'm on the board, it's just the general City of Clearwater notification that the agenda is ready, because I get the agendas of everything in my email. But I would appreciate a heads up about meetings. And our next meeting will be July what?
Let me see here.
19th,
19.
excuse me, the 19th.
Okay,
The 19th,
thanks.
yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay. John?
Thank you to Marina for covering my item.
All right. Very well. And with that, we'll adjourn. Thank you.